But go ahead and say whatever you'd like to say. We brought that article to kind of end with today some false flag events that have taken place in the last 2 weeks, or at least possibilities. But yeah, go ahead and say what you got to say.
Well, she didn't seem to know anything about it, and she said, "Well, just email it to me," and just kind of blew me off, and just kind of, when I told her what the gist of the article was about, Dick Cheney and the meeting, and painting PT boats, and Cy Hurst, I said, my thing was, shouldn't you or somebody in Congress haul this fella into the Congress and question him and get him to give up his source?
And just for the record, Seymour Hersh is a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist. This isn't someone on the internet just blogging. This is a well-respected journalist that when he puts pen to paper, it's considered to be valid.
And I told her this. She didn't seem to know anything about it. Said email it to her. Didn't think it was any kind of an important issue. And I'm at the point now where I just want to send Ron Paul a complete and total freshman Congress.
Well, wouldn't that
no
be
incumbent except for Ron Paul.
I tell you, I advocate that anyone that gets elected, one term for everybody. No two-termers for anyone, Congress, Senate, President. And that way it's fresh every time, and that was the only way to ensure that we can destroy the corruption in Washington.
Well, I don't know if I agree with you on that one, because then we couldn't have Ron Paul in more than once. So when you get a good one in there, you get a good one.
Well, when have we had a good one as president?
Who's that?
When was the last time we had a good one in as president?
Well, there was Thomas Jefferson.
Okay, we got to go back a ways. I agree with you on that. Is there anything else you'd like to add today? And hey, I commend you for going and for the truth and talking to Mears Fox. And if more people would do that, the world would be a better place.
Well, I just want to tell the you and the listeners up there, there was just a bunch of older people there. There was no young faces. Everybody there was with white hair, establishment. I tried to talk to a county commissioner about ending the property tax. He laughed at me.
I bet.
He says, we've got to have programs. He's a Republican. I said, what about lower taxes? Well, you cut spending is what you do. I tried to explain to him. I said, well, how are we going to have this and that? I said, well, you have Austrian economics is the way to go. His eyes glazed over, and he looked at me. What's that? So I can't figure it out.
Well, hey, I certainly do appreciate you calling, and I can testify, too. I met at the library this past Monday. Virginia Fox was there, and there was a couple of young people, but by far it was the older generation. We can't seem to get the young generation fired up about politics and their future, but the time's wasting. They better start now. But I certainly do appreciate you calling. Feel free to call in any time, and is there anything else you'd like to add today?
Well, I think if everybody that went to the Ron Paul meetup groups, the young people at the colleges, would all flood the county commission meetings and these breakfasts. These Republicans have breakfast every month, and I think they have them in every county. And the Democrats, maybe we ought to just, because I'm classifying myself as a constitutionalist, and I can talk to Democrats and Republicans, and it's not about a party, it's about a country. And I'm just trying to get people motivated, take them the Constitution, pocket copy of the Constitution, maybe the Citizens Rule Book, provoke thinking.
We got another phone call, and Billy's telling me we got to take a break, so we're going to take this phone call, but feel free to call back anytime, okay?
All right, well, God bless y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We got another phone call. Are you with me today?
Yes, Farron, this is Dave.
Thank you, sir.
How's you and Brian doing today?
We're doing real good. We're laying it out there.
I wanted to just add a little something to the program. The very originators of democracy is attributed to the Greeks, and they had an interesting tradition which would, I think, work very nicely even now, and that is that once every year they would have what you would call a reverse election. They would vote for the least popular politician, whoever was doing the poorest job in their opinion, and that individual would be ostracized out of the country for a minimum of 10 years. This kept politicians on their toes a little more. They didn't want to be on the bottom of that list.
See, that's
I thought it was interesting. I think that would work very nicely today, but you'd have to have more than one. You'd have to vote 30 or 40 out each year.
That's why, sir, George Bush just recently purchased a large ranch in Paraguay.
Yeah, he's leaving whether we throw him out or not.
Yeah, right.
He knows what he's left us.
That's all I'd like to say, Perrin. Thanks again for the nice job that you and Brian are doing.
Hey, thank you for calling, and we're going to take a break, and we'd like to have some more phone calls before we go off the air. Okay, we're back on the real news. Real quick, I'd like to finish up the USS Liberty, and we could spend a whole broadcast here on it. This ship had a 16-foot microwave dish, and the Israeli Army said that they thought it was an old rust bucket of the Egyptian Army. We've had Israeli Air Force pilots that's come out and said that it was a false flag event. They saw the large flag, and we're going to cut from that pretty quick and go on to some other news.
I'd just like to add to that Israeli pilots are among the finest pilots in the world, and they would not have made that mistake.
If not the finest.
Absolutely. I'd like to quickly go over the July 7, 2005 bombings in London in the Underground. The most astounding aspect of this entire event was that morning on July 7th, there was actually a police exercise being conducted in which, you guessed it, a terrorist bombing was to take place in the Underground. And we're going to play an audio clip from Peter Powers, Managing Director of Visor Consultants. He was in charge of the police exercise that morning.
Today we were running an exercise for a company, bearing in mind I'm now in the private sector, and we sat everybody down in the city, 1,000 people involved in the whole organisation, but the crisis team. And the most peculiar thing was we based our scenario on the simultaneous attacks on the Underground and mainline station. So we had to suddenly switch an exercise from fictional to real. And one of the first things is get that bureau number. When you have a list of people missing, tell them. And so it took a long time.
Just to get this right, you were actually working today on an exercise that envisioned virtually this scenario.
Almost precisely. I was up until 2 o'clock this morning because it's our job, my own company, Visor Consultants. We specialise in helping people to get their crisis management response. How do you jump from slow time thinking to quick time doing? And we chose a scenario with their assistance which is based on a terrorist attack because they're very close to a property occupied by Jewish businessmen. They're in the city, and there are more American banks in the city than there are in the whole of New York. A logical thing to do. And I've still got the...
I was going to say, how extraordinary today must feel for you as it unfolds. You mentioned a few moments ago there our experience with Irish Republican terrorism. Yeah. And of course it was very different, wasn't it? Because however perverted their behaviour, the IRA believed itself to have some sort of code of honour and tended to issue warnings, although of course they often came late to do any good.